Good evening, friends. Let us begin our Sunday congregational service with the standard Sunday congregational prayer. The words will be shown on the screen. Okay. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, Thou abidest in all, Thou art all, Thou assumest all forms, Thou art the origin and goal of all, Thou art the self of all, Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto Thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May our minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. The title of my talk tonight is called Beautiful Far Away. It's actually a direct translation from the Russian song title there, Procrastinator. It also gets translated as Beautiful Future and Glorious Future. And we're going to use those that particular interpretation for the talk tonight. Because the concept of future has always really fascinated human beings, if you think about it. The imaginative faculty of the mind paints for us a picture of things that it may think are yet to come based on our past experience. When correctly used, our imagination can give rise to useful inventions or bring about new ways of evaluating our present circumstance. And then contemplation on these ideas, on these imagined ideas, may motivate a change in direction for a person, the society, or for humankind. However, when misapplied, imagination creates unnecessary suffering and gives rise to needless worry about circumstances which may never occur. So fear is largely imagination wrongly applied. Now, Vedanta says all human beings want three things: infinite existence, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss. Sat Chit Ananda, existence, knowledge, and bliss. And all activity can be seen as pursuit of one of these three or all of these three. And this is true whether the pursuit is driven from the conscious mind or even more often from the subconscious mind. So various methods have been developed by various cultures, in many cultures, in attempts to divine the future, to foretell what is coming. And this was done with perhaps the goal of reducing life's uncertainties, the mysteries, and to remove some of the fear of life. Calendars, for example, allow people to predict the patterns of the seasons, which were useful in agriculture, planting and harvesting, or for preparing for seasonal change, such as monsoons and dry spells, or the onset of the cold winter. Now, the calendar used by the Hindu astrologers to determine holy days and festivals is an example of a luni-solar calendar because it's based on the movements of the sun and the moon. Mathematical laws validated by astronomical observation eventually were successful in predicting astronomical events. Such laws allowed Edmund Halley, for example, to state confidently that the comet he observed in 1682 was the same comet previously seen in 1607 and earlier in 1531. He then was successful in predicting that the same comet would return in 1758. Chinese chronicles and Greek chronicles show a similar comet with a similar period all the way back to 467 BC, although 240 BC is considered the official first sighting of that comet. Jyotish, which is Hindu astrology, is also used for determining the future, but with respect to people, destinations of people rather than the positions of objects. And so I'm going to take an example from the book Sri Ramakrishna and His Divine Play, And it comes in chapter 5, The Birth of a Great Soul, on page 109. And this is now a quote from that book. Kshudram checked the astrological signs of the newborn child and found he came in the world at a very auspicious moment. It was Wednesday, 6 Palgun, 1242 in the Bengali era, or 1757 in the Saka era, or Thursday, 18 February 1836 on the Gregorian calendar. Now notice already 3 different calendar systems are being used right there. The child was born 12 minutes before sunrise. The day was the auspicious second lunar day of the bright fortnight, and Purvabhadra Padra, the 25th of the lunar constellations, had joined at his birth, which created Siddhi Yoga, a fortunate astrological conjunction. So what I used was an online planetarium. To map out the sky at the time of Sri Ramakrishna's birth. It might be a little hard to see there, but your attention in that orange box is what I want to convey, because in that orange box is the sun, the moon, and the Mercury. So I'm going to read now, continue to read from the prediction. Since I'm on wireless here, maybe I can do this. Okay, so inside the box, we have the sun, Mercury, and the moon. And then when you click up the moon, you get the moon data, which is a 2% illumination on that day. And this was given just before sunrise on the day of Sri Ramakrishna's birth. So now I'll continue reading from Sri Ramakrishna and his design play, and look inside the orange box. The sun, moon, and Mercury had come together as the astrological sign under which the child was born. Moreover, Venus, Mars, and Saturn were in the highest ascension. This indicated that the child would have an extraordinary life. Later, some distinguished astrologers said that the child had been born during an auspicious arrangement of the planets. Now this is a quote within the quote, this quoting from the astrologers. They said that astrological science decisively concludes such a person will be profoundly religious, highly respected, always engaged in virtuous deeds. He will live in a temple surrounded by many disciples. He will establish a new religious order, be renowned all over the world as a great soul, and be worshipped by the people as part of Narayana. And this is how the astrologers presented it. So this is on the left is a photocopy from the book, Sri Ramakrishna and his Divine Play. And then I just pulled out that little square chart in the corner to make it bigger. And in each of the symbols is a representation of the physical layout of the planets, which we just saw. Okay, so what you'll see in there, I translated it into English as best as I could. And you can see the orange triangle is now the same as the orange box. And in the orange triangle, I like this being on wireless, actually. It's kind of nice. Okay, so inside this orange box, we have the letter Cha for Chandra, the moon. Ra, which is Ravi, I believe, for the sun. I was expecting Surya, but they used R. And then the numbers on the side are actually the lunar mansion in which those were. And then you have some of the other planets, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn over here, which goes by the name Shani. So they have the Shah. And this word here, I was a little puzzled about that when I saw it, but because it had multiple translations, and some of them were ominous and kind of had a interpretation which I didn't think would be right for the coinciding of the birth of Sri Ramakrishna. And then I finally found one that worked, retrograde. So those planets were very likely in retrograde motion as seen relative to the Earth. If you're wondering how we go from the planets to this chart, I'll just give you a quick tour of how they do it. And so courtesy of our children's program from a couple years ago, we built the celestial sphere. That's one of our students, Vital, who is a well-known personality here. But basically, they take that 360 degrees and they first divide it into 27 parts. It's called a nakshatra. Each one of those 27 is further subdivided into 4, so 4 times 27 gives you 108 pieces. And each of those, that's called a pada, and each of those is 10/3 degrees, or 3.3333, or 3 1/3 degrees. 9 padas, so if you multiply 9 times 10/3, you get 30 degrees, which is a zodiac constellation. It's called a Rashi. And so that's how you map the physical locations from their projection on the celestial sphere as seen from Earth into the astrologer's chart. It's just another representation of the physics. Very accurate. It's amazing how it works. But I have one more topic in astronomy before we get to the Vedanta details, which I wanted to discuss. And this is called existential astronomy, because its concern is with incoming objects to the Earth. And just recently in November, actually, NASA just launched a test shot out to an asteroid, which is going to attempt to deflect an asteroid this coming September, in September 22. It's kind of interesting. But these incoming events, though infrequent, are not rare. That's testified by our moon. This New Year's Day, actually, 2022, it couldn't have been more fortunate in terms of writing a paper, but there was a small event over Pittsburgh, very small. It was, I think they were saying the one over Pittsburgh was about equivalent of 30 tons of TNT. The one that's being displayed now happened over Russia in 2013. It was a 400 kiloton event, and it created almost 1,500 non-fatal injuries and damage to about 7,000 buildings. And there are videos online of that incoming meteor there. Imagine driving to work and seeing this, right? So you're seeing this little streak, and then all of a sudden you have an explosion which is bigger and brighter than the sun. This is 9:30 in the morning. And the sound, if you watch the video online, make sure you keep your sound on your computer down a little bit. I use a very high bandwidth speaker system for my music, and I had it turned up kind of high, and I can do all of the bass response and everything, and it was quite a shocking explosion that's captured by that video. But then even earlier in June of 1908, a much larger asteroid did a 12 megaton explosion over the Siberian wilderness. So we're talking here about events of magnitudes of nuclear devices. So you may be wondering, why are you starting a talk on Vedanta with existential astronomy and topics about intercepting asteroids and meteors? And of course, we're concerned about existential matters, whether you talk about climate change, global warming, or this astronomy. And those are important things. But I think what Vedanta would bring to the table here, now that I've created hopefully some sense of urgency what it means to be an existential crisis, is that if we preserve the life, we also have to be concerned about what is the quality of that future life. And this is where we go into the Vedantic teachings, because just the basic physical existence without proper spiritual values would not be a very promising life, and we'll hear from one of the swamis of this order pretty soon on that. So you can see the moon record of past events, and so you know they're not uncommon, let's put it that way. But now I want to move into some Vedantic topics with regard to thinking about the quality of life in these future societies. And we first come to, I just want to talk briefly about Sanatana Dhamma in Hindu theology, and in particular the concept of yugas. And so yugas are times of calculable duration, which each has a specific quality or characteristic based on the preponderance of the society. For example, Satya Yuga, the truth, it's the golden age, the golden yuga. And it's said there that almost all of the people, perhaps all of the people in that society, was living life in harmony with the Vedic teachings, in harmony with truth and righteousness. But the cycle continues, and it begins with a change from Satya Yoga down to what they call the Silver Age, and then a Bronze Age, and then finally the Iron Age, which is also called Kali Yuga. And with each successive descent, it's said that the population loses approximately 25% in virtue and character, until you reach Kali Yuga, where only 25% of the population is said to be living in harmony with universal righteousness and truth. And while the methods used to calculate these yugas are similar, there are different conclusions, perhaps, in terms of the duration of each and whether or if the upward cycle from Kali Yuga has begun or when it will begin. And so I just want to ask the question, are these science or mythology or both? Do they apply to the outer world, or are they simply a representation of an inner spiritual journey? And I suppose there could be debates on these questions too. However, I am reminded of the statement in one of my yoga books which says, that which is outside is also inside, and that which is not inside is not outside. And there's another ancient Hermetic teaching which says similar, as above, so below. So what do the lines of teachers of Vedanta say about the future? Do they have visions? Do they make predictions? We read in the book Sri Ramakrishna and His Divine Play that Sri Ramakrishna evaluated the spiritual potential of those visiting him using yoga methods. We read that he saw in Narendranath an immensely capable, spiritually advanced soul with a large spiritual mission ahead of him. That mission was the establishment of a new religion, a new dispensation for the future. We also read that he saw in Narendranath that Swami Vivekananda would be the instrument to set into motion the future predicted by those astrologers and revealed to Sri Ramakrishna by his yogic methods, recalling from the astrologers that Sri Ramakrishna would establish a new religious order, be renowned all over the world as a great soul, and worshipped by the people as part of Narayana. And so although Narendra wanted to remain in the higher states of consciousness, Sri Ramakrishna told him, no, you have a big mission to do, you have much work to do, and he trained him in preparing him for that mission. Sri Ramakrishna also foretold that soon after Narendra realized the truth of who he was, he would leave the body by the act of will. Now, historically, we know Vedantic teachings have been kept secret among forest-dwelling sannyasis, but Swami Vivekananda thought the time had come to bring these ancient, previously secret teachings out of the forest for the benefit of humankind. And since it's been about 129 years since Swamiji came to America and gave his talk at the Parliament of Religions, I wanted to look at some of the important teachings of not only Swami Vivekananda, but the monks who continue his work to this day, especially in the context of a highly industrialized, highly technological societies of our time. And so while discussing the yugas, which we just did, we discuss how the character of the majority of the people determines the quality of life in that society and in that age. And an online talk I saw titled In Conversation with Swami Ranganathananda. Here Swami referred to a book titled The Selfish Gene and said, and this will be a quote from Swami Ranganathananda, quote, "We have to develop character. A nation without character will get destroyed. Character doesn't come from the genetic system. A most important thing we have to remember. We think that this body itself will give us character." He shook his head, he waved his hands. Nothing. That's the end of the quote. So Vedanta calls us to go beyond body, beyond mind, beyond even intellect, if we are to learn to live in harmony with others in accordance with the highest values of eternal righteousness and in truth. And further, Vedanta says that the realization of these truths is the only way to experience the existence, knowledge, and bliss sought by all. Swami Ranganathananda continued, "The answer you get from Vedanta derives from the ancient Upanishads of India, where they have studied human beings in depth and they have developed a profound spiritual dimension, a divine dimension in every being, every living being, but the human being alone has the organic capacity to penetrate into that truth which manifests as moral values in our social life. Ethical values, moral values, all values are spiritual, said Swamiji. And so comes this wonderful idea. You may be irreligious, non-religious, atheistic, but still men and women of character. And that's the end of the quote from Swami Ranganathananda. Swami Vivekananda said similar. The whole of religion is the manifestation of the innate divinity within each and all, and that books and temples are but secondary details. And so along with Swami Vivekananda, Swami Ranganathananda, and Swami Adishwarananda wrote and spoke extensively on these topics. In his book, Human Being in Depth, Swami Ranganathananda discussed a concept called the Second Homeostasis, writing that the first homeostasis, which means the stabilization of our temperature, our automatic breathing and things, was given to higher life forms, mammals, the control of the temperature. We don't have to go lay in the sun for 20 minutes in the morning to get our body temperature up to the point where we can function, right? So that was given by nature. But he says the second homeostasis must be developed through effort. And so Yoga and Vedanta say that one's consciousness can be raised by certain methods, and that raising our consciousness to its pinnacle is the goal of life. This raising requires ever-increasing vigilance and energy as one advances, cautions Swami Ranganathananda. So are these Yoga and Vedanta teachings, belief systems, or science? Is divinity really manifest in all? If yes, is there a systematic way of making it manifest? And then what is the proof? Swami Vivekananda wrote in his Raja Yoga, it is not the sign of a candid scientific mind to throw anything overboard without proper investigation. Now, I had read that sentence some 20, 25 years ago, just reading that little book. And reading that one sentence is probably the reason, to a large degree, that I'm here even today giving this talk, because he appealed to the investigator's scientific nature in this personality, and I had to do the investigations for myself. And so as in the debate of astronomy versus astrology, at least in the West, the question of what is the proof, what is the proof always arises. And it comes from doubters and skeptics, but it also comes from sincere people who really want to know, who are truly interested. But traditional proofs may not and cannot always address the matter satisfactorily. For example, the Indian mathematician Srinivas Ramanujan credited his mathematical insight and results to divinity, saying that the knowledge was revealed to him by a goddess named Namajiri Tayar. It is also claimed, he said, that an equation has no meaning for him unless it expresses the thought of God. And other musicians and artists and scientists, some in the West as well, give similar testimony that when they create a great work, it is not their work, but they're just the vehicle, the instrument by which the divine works through. Ramanujan was asked to prove his equations, but originally, or could not provide the proofs by methods being used in the West at the time. And the first impulse of those Western mathematicians was to discredit his work because the traditional proofs were not given by him. Yet the elegance and truth of those results could not be denied. And I'm reminded here of Satyam Eva Jayate, truth conquers of its own accord. And so his work rose to its rightful place in history. And the British mathematician Hardy is quoted as saying, those equations must be true because if they were not true, no one would have the imagination to invent them. But then it occurred to me, I wonder if Hardy realized it or not, that he too, at making that statement, was also using an intuitive sense. Because how could you predict the future and say no one would have the imagination to invent them? But anyway, today his works are accepted as a major contribution to the field of mathematics, and most of his equations have been proven using methods of contemporary mathematics. Some are still being studied, though. Okay, I'm going to change theme a little bit. So almost everybody hearing this talk today, here in this room or listening online, I'm sure has certainly thought about the future at some time or another. Further, I'm confident that most want a beautiful future, a glorious future for themselves and for those they hold dear. And people very generous of heart extend this idea of a beautiful future to their neighbors, community, the nation, humanity, and perhaps beyond. Let the whole world be our own, taught Sarada Devi. Love thy neighbor as thyself, taught Jesus. And underscoring its teaching of an all-pervading, non-dual consciousness, Vedanta adds to that, because thy neighbor is thyself. So the idea of a beautiful future, however envisioned, of course, is the prime mover of human activity. And at the level of body, of mind, of intellect, what makes for a beautiful or glorious future, of course, is highly individual, subjective, and subject to change over time, even within an individual. But truth comes from beyond body, from beyond mind, from beyond intellect. And its realization will ultimately manifest the same experience for all, according to Vedanta. As we already heard from Swami Ranganathananda, the human being alone has the capacity, the organic capacity, to penetrate into these truths. Each should work to manifest his or her own ideal, advised Swami Vivekananda, until the ultimate truth is realized. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. So here the word stop implies action, right? Because you can't stop something unless you're doing something. So arise and wake and work towards the ideal is the message, I think. In his booklet, Christ the Messenger, Swami Vivekananda explained how the East had undergone millennia after millennia on the wheel of fortune. The rise and fall of expansive kingdoms, of gain, of loss, of abundance and lack, natural beauty and its subsequent decay and destruction. And collectively, Swamiji calls this ebb of flow and wealth of kingdoms, material, aesthetic treasures, a Golgotha, a fortune. So if this word Golgotha comes from the Bible, and it's a place of crucifixion outside of Jerusalem, a place of death, of destruction, impermanence. So Swamiji continues, by repeated experience of the temporal and permanent nature of those categories, the kingdoms, the wealth, the Oriental mind was forced to look inward for higher peace and higher happiness. And Jesus, too, if you think about it, said it. He said, the kingdom of heaven comes in a way that cannot be seen. It's beyond the senses. He said the kingdom of heaven is within. Now, I suppose if Jesus made that statement today, he'd be taken to the nearest X-ray machine or the nearest MRI to try, so that they could try to get some kind of proof of this. But again, I'll just emphasize, traditional proofs cannot and do not always satisfy in these matters. The statement, the kingdom of heaven is within, is of course in keeping with Vedanta and yogic teachings. And the outer arrangement of material things is not enough to give peace or universally desired existence, knowledge, and bliss. And so the rise of materialism is one reason that Swami Vivekananda had thought that the time had come to bring these previously secret teachings out of the forests and to the people. And if you think about it, putting one's hopes solely on the material and the external is to exist in the Golgotha. Others may counter, saying religion is the opium of the masses, but simply we just need to sit and observe and analyze and watch and reason and apply analysis properly to determine if these ways of life in highly technological and industrial societies are really creating more happiness and more peace in the society. And each can do the analysis and decide for themselves. I'm not here to tell you how to think about it. But of the many ideas of a glorious future, I think the idea of seeing God, or the establishment of a perfect world, a utopia, or heaven and earth, are probably the grandest. In Christianity, we see that the Savior, they say, had come once already, but will come again in the future to establish a heaven on earth. In Judaic eschatology, the Messiah is expected in the future, to be foretold by certain events which are described in that eschatology, but for them, the Messiah has not yet appeared. In Hinduism, it's said that the avatar comes whenever virtue is in decline. So here the question then is simply, what is the current state of virtue? If it is in decline, then we should expect that there is perhaps an avatar living among us even now. On Sunday, this past January 2nd, Swami Vivekananda succinctly explained the process of this raising of consciousness, and I'll quote from the Sunday, January 2nd lecture. In the fourth chakra, at the heart level, we ask the question, who am I? Vedanta begins with self-inquiry. We find that even if we could enjoy the whole universe and become the most famous person, life would be meaningless. We cannot expect to feel God if other desires are draining away our mental, physical power. At the fifth chakra, the spiritual answer to who am I becomes clear, but not yet experienced. All other desires have been eliminated. At the sixth chakra, the eye level, we see the presence of God in everything. And at the seventh chakra, there is no description left, and the realization of God is achieved. So that's a quote from the Sunday, January 2nd talk. For devotees, of course, the common complainer question is, when will I see God? George Harrison, in the song My Sweet Lord, sang, I really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long. Devotees of Sri Ramakrishna asked for his intercession with Divine Mother. They said, please, if you appeal on our behalf, Divine Mother is sure to grant it because you know she'll listen to you. Please. But still, he said, no, the time and place should be left to Divine Mother alone, and he did not intercede for that particular request. We see Arjuna, too, in the Bhagavad Gita, appeals to Krishna. Please show your divine form. This comes in chapter 11. Please show your divine form. But when Krishna actually granted it to him, he found the vision very difficult to handle. And he said, no, okay, enough. I just prefer to see your other form. Please go back. And Swami Vivekananda in his Raja Yoga also says that most cannot return from that state. So is it better to merge and become sugar, or to remain apart and enjoy the taste? Is it conducive to our desire for our beautiful future to want to see the cosmic form? Or is it better just to live in harmony and service of it? Again, these are thoughts to be considered. I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, it was in part inspired by the songs, or maybe I didn't, but I should have. But I listed some songs there, so I do want to introduce some verses of the songs listed there. And this whole talk actually came about because I came for a meeting with Swami and the architects on a project here, and then afterwards we sat down and had tea, and we were talking, and I was telling him I found this YouTube channel from Russia with some really nice spiritual songs, and I could see the hints, and it helped to bridge, in seeing the divine in all. You can see that different cultures have their own way of expressing these ideas, and even if they don't know Vedanta specifically, that innate desire of searching is there. And I could see it in the songs. I could hear it in the songs. So that's where I was explaining to him, Swami, about that, and he said, well, would you like to do a talk about it? And I agreed. So that's why I'm working these songs into what is otherwise a talk on Vedanta. So this first song, Procrastinator del Yoga, begins, in the silver dew of early morning, a voice from the glorious future beckons me. But the road ahead has no footprints to follow and makes me dizzy like the merry-go-round of childhood. So we are called by the spiritual idea, God realization, self-realization. But although we are attracted by it after some study, we also recognize that striving to such a height can be dizzying, can be demanding, and is said by Vedanta, like walking on the edge of a razor. So this raising of consciousness requires ever-increasing vigilance and energy as one advances. We already heard this from Swami Ranganathananda from his book, Human Being in Depth. And the idea of dizzying height can also be heard in excerpts from the talk, The Direct Way of Knowledge, given by Swami Adishwarananda in St. Louis in February 2005. So I'll now give you some excerpts. You can imagine, if you know Swami Adishwarananda, his personality, his kind of voice, you can kind of put this in his voice if you know him. But the talk excerpts. He says, the first sign of knowledge is a basic understanding of fundamental facts. The idea comes, these teachings are not fabrications. These are facts, let me follow. This is the first sign of awakening. 2, then knowledge reveals that it is our attachments, our imaginations, and our fantasies that are getting in the way and preventing us from getting on the highway to truth. Ultimately, it comes to your mind, you created walls around yourself and became attached to the wall. You must gain control. That is the roadblock. The 4 yogas tell us how to demolish the roadblock. True knowledge says that which you created, only you can demolish. Okay, continuing on, these are the words of Swami Adishwarananda. Nobody else. This is the second stage of awakening. The third stage of awakening is a terrible commotion. You want to get out, but you cannot. Now think about that statement, and this is where I begin to tie in the songs too, right? So Swami Adishwarananda, you want to get out, but you cannot. And so the verse from the song said, in a carousel we go round and round, right? It must be stopped by the operator in order for us to get off safely. Otherwise we would risk injury and jumping off. Now I'm going to recall here a story. This was told to me at secondhand, so I'll be honest with you. It's a story told to me by one of our devotees, longtime devotees here, about the minister that used to teach here, Swami Vivekananda, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And apparently some of the devotees went with Swami Vivekananda to either a local carnival or to Disney World or some amusement park somewhere, and they took the Swami to go. And they spent the day walking around the park, watching the kids and people to play the games and ride the rides and all of that, you know, the things you would imagine, you know, a Swami would do at an amusement park. And finally the devotee said, come on, Swamiji, we want to go for a ride. And he said, no, you go, I'll just wait. And he said, no, come on, we're not going to go on the roller coaster, we're not going to go on any of those crazy spin things, we're just going to go, we'll take the merry-go-round, the carousel. And he said, no. They said, come on, Swami, it's the mildest ride of this whole park. You can go with us on the carousel. And finally, in a slightly agitated voice, he said, look. And you know, if you know him, he also has that deep sounding, look, I spent my whole life trying to get off of the carousel, and now you're trying to get me to go back on, right? So it ties in very nicely with this theme and with this song here. But now continuing from Swami Adishwarananda's lecture on direct knowledge. The 4th stage of awakening of knowledge is the longing for God. Without knowledge, however, neither yoga contemplation, nor devotion, nor even selfless activities are possible. So knowledge is required. So that's the end of the Swami Adishwarananda excerpts for right now. We'll come back to some in a few minutes. There was an interfaith Zoom meeting on the 13th, a few days back, of which Swami Yogatmananda spoke, and he opened with the chant Bhadram Kanebi Shrunuyama Devaha, so auspiciousness with our ears may we hear, O gods. We chant that often here, and it's used in other teachings of Vedanta too. And in particular, Swami Chinmayananda actually made the following remarks. After chanting that prayer to open up his talk on the Mundaka Upanishad, he called the prayer the Das Kapital of the Hindus. And he said that if each one in a society or a community would ardently and sincerely pray for auspiciousness and act accordingly, in that society, in that culture, and the character would be so high, jails would be redundant, slums unknown, poverty unimaginable, and disease a rare exception. And so he was describing basically what we heard earlier about the Satya Yuga, the golden age. And he said it was only possible because the rishis of those days lived a life of renunciation and always acted in perfect coordination with the principles of truth and universal love. And he called that a perfect generation. So Vedanta teaches that the way to a beautiful future is through the development of character and its attainment by the majority, which is why I was saying that perhaps we could consider the development of character an existential crisis if we want society to survive, thrive, and benefit all of humankind and all of life going forward. We have to work on this, as we heard from Swami Raghunathananda. And Swami Yatishwarananda, in his book, Meditation and Spiritual Life, also wrote similarly. He said, our immediate problem is not necessarily God, but rather ourselves. And so the 4 yogas taught by Swami Vivekananda and the monks which continue to teach the new dispensation provide these methods. In his Karma Yoga and Raja Yoga book, Swami Vivekananda explains that each and every act done by a person leaves a residual impression in our mind. And the sum of all of these residual impressions is what determines a person's character. And so think back to the song, right? We experience these teachings as a dizzying height, because if you think of what he just said, each and every act that we do, every thought, is the development of our character. It puts a high demand on each of us to continually, always act right, think right, behave right. Otherwise, we're building up a future that we'll have to come back and address at a future time. Now I want to continue from Swami Yatishwarananda's lecture on the direct way of knowledge. He says there that knowledge is fire. Before it can illumine, it burns. It burns everything. You will be frightened, but one day you will have to do. If not in this life, you will be born again and again and repeat the same story. So we remain bound by our own will. You may ask, will following these teachings not make life cold? No. You will have millionfold joy when you look upon God seated in the hearts of all of your brothers and sisters. Currently, you are saying, this one alone is my sister, this one alone is my brother, all others are foreign. What I have just told, what the sages tell is true knowledge, but who listens? This is the background of the path of direct knowledge. Direct knowledge is the response of the whole mind. So that's the end of the quotes from Swami Yatishwarananda. So go back to the song. I hear a voice from the glorious future, and it is asking me sternly, for that beautiful tomorrow, what have you done today? And the person answers the voice in the song, I will become more kind and never leave a friend in need. And so helping others is known to keep our imagination from concentrating on our own problems. And this, of course, in itself brings some peace and joy. And then another online video I saw recently, there was a nuance on the idea of work, service, and worship, which if I have heard that idea before, it didn't register so subtly as it did when I saw this one. But the idea was this, that work, when done with the consciousness of helping another, of compassion, of empathy, or out of kindness, is service, but not yet rises to the idea of worship. It is only when service is done with the continual, unwavering attitude of reverence for the indwelling life and consciousness in those beings being served, that the service becomes worship. So I thought that was a very interesting idea. And we kind of heard this from Swami Yatishwarananda too, where he says, without knowledge, even selfless service is not possible. So we have to have this Vedantic teaching of the universal, non-dual consciousness ever present in every being if our service is to become worship. That's the idea. And if we have this reverence towards all, then over time this reverence for the life and the consciousness present in every being will lead us to God vision. See, we chant before the meals here, Om Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam. Right? So Brahma is the items being offered. It is the act of offering. It's even the fire into which the offerings are being, the fire into which the offerings are placed. And if these seemingly non-sentient items are Brahman, then for certain we are called to see other jivas, other souls, other beings as Brahman. That's the very idea of namaste, right? Namas, the noun, bow, and te, the pronoun, to you, that form of the pronoun to you. So namaste, to you a bow. And it's just seeing the reverence in all jivas. So I'm going to quote now from Swami Vivekananda as recorded in the Complete Works, chapter 7. After so much austerity, I have understood this as the real truth. God is present in every jiva. There is no other God. Who serves jiva serves God indeed. After some pause, Swamiji, addressing the disciple, said, "What I have told you today, inscribe in your heart. See that you do not forget it." Now recall that the astrologers had predicted Sri Ramakrishna would be seen as part of Narayana. So Narayana is considered a 1,000-headed being, a 1,000-eyed being, 1,000 limbs, the universal self, identified with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, all of the attributes of the Supreme God. So in order to see Ramakrishna as part of Narayana, again, this idea of 1,000 heads, 1,000 beings. So you can see Ramakrishna's present in all of these jivas, perhaps. Whoever serves jiva serves God indeed, said Swami Vivekananda. And Jesus said something similar. He said, "Whatever you have done for the least of these, you have done for me." In the Tuesday class, January 4th here, Swami Yogatmananda said that Sri Ramakrishna himself respected talented and gifted people by recognizing the special manifestation of God in them. He had no ego visiting such great people uninvited. His sole purpose in visiting them was to salute the greatness of God manifest through them. Now, so if we agree and understand these points, it's not too much of a stretch, really, to think that we are seeing God here and now, or at least could be, perhaps, if we sort of correct our vision with some spiritual specs, right? I need these to correct my physical vision, but if there was some sort of thing called spiritual specs we could put on, we might be seeing God right here and now. And I think that's sort of the goal of all of these yogas. And another talk, this is a conversation between Swami Vivekananda and one of the disciples. The disciple says, "Sir, there's such a diversity of religions and ideas among the people. It is a difficult affair to bring harmony among them." And Swamiji answered in anger. He's saying, "If you think any work too difficult, don't come here. Through the grace of God, all paths become easy. Your work is to serve the poor and the miserable without any distinction of caste or color, and you have no need to think about the results. Your duty is to go on working, and then everything will follow of itself. You are all intelligent and have been coming here for a long time. Say, what have you done?" asked Swamiji. So he asked, just like the voice in the song, right? "For the glorious tomorrow, what have you done today?" And Swamiji continued, In the next life, you can read Vedanta and other philosophies, but give this life for the service of others, then I shall know that your coming here has not been in vain." So now I just want to have finish with a few excerpts adapted from a talk titled, "Is Vedanta the Future Religion?" And this talk itself was given by Swami Vivekananda in San Francisco on April 8th, 1900. And so it comes sort of near the end of his life, right? After many years of travel and study and spiritual disciplines and living with Sri Ramakrishna, and sort of so I consider this sort of the culmination of some of his teachings. Of course, next week at the symposium and during the puja, and week after that too in the Sunday lectures, you may hear different aspects. But this was one talk that tied in nicely with the theme of the future and the glorious future. So this is now a quote until I tell you otherwise. This will be a quote from Swami, excerpts really, because the full talk was probably an hour or more talk, so I can't do it in just 10 remaining minutes. So I'll just give you some of the key points that I thought were important. Vedanta is the most ancient religion of the world. Is it going to be the religion of the future? This question is very difficult to answer. Possibly. That is the question we want to discuss. The Vedantic idea is the infinite principle of God embodied in every one of us. The idea of God sitting up on a cloud is downright materialism. God is spirit and should be worshipped in spirit and in truth. We are all spirit. Why is it that we do not realize it? What makes you different from me? Body and nothing else. Forget the body. All is spirit. What does Vedanta teach us? First, you need not go out of yourself to know the truth. All the past and all the future are here in the present. Did any one of you ever see the past? When you think you are knowing the past, you are only imagining the past in the present moment. To see the future too, you have to bring it into the present. The present is the only reality. The rest is imagination. The present is all that there is. There is only the one. All is here right now. One moment in infinite in time is quite as complete and all-inclusive as every other moment. All that is and was and will be is here in the present. Let anybody try to imagine anything outside of it, they will not succeed. We, with 5 senses, look upon this world and find it gross, having color, having form, sound, and the like. Suppose I develop a different sense organ. For example, the ability to sense electricity, an electric sense. All will change. Suppose my senses grow finer. You will all appear changed. If I change, you change. If I go beyond the power of the senses, you will appear as spirit and God. Things are not what they seem. We shall understand this by and by, and then see it. All the heavens, everything, are here and now. They are really nothing but appearances on the divine presence. This presence is much greater than all of the earths and heavens. It is God. It is a hard thing even to understand, harder to understand than it is to believe. Therefore, Vedanta formulates not universal brotherhood, but universal oneness. There is no death, not even the mind dies. How can even the body die? One leaf may fall. Does the tree die? The universe is my body. See how it continues. All minds are mine. With all feet I walk. Through all mouths I speak. In every body I reside. Did not Divine Mother say something similar to Sri Ramakrishna at one point when he was having a hard time eating? Yeah. Why can we not feel it? We have become bound up with this mind and can only be here, not there. What is immortality? Immortality is knowing ourselves as one with all, living in all bodies, perceiving through all minds. Eventually we are bound to feel in other bodies. What else is sympathy? It is quite possible that the time will come when I shall feel through the whole universe. There are many who feel horrified when they hear these teachings. They do not like to be told you are divine. Whatever you think, that you become. If you have to think good thoughts, great thoughts. Anything that is done for us by another can never be our own. You cannot learn spiritual truths from my lectures. If you had learned anything, I was only the spark that brought it out, made it flash. That is all the prophets and teachers can do. It takes hard work to become spiritual. Superstitions are all materialism because they are all based on the consciousness of the body. Body, 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 he says. No spirit there. What is the God of Vedanta? It is principle, not person. You and I are all personal gods. The absolute God of the universe, the creator, the preserver, the destroyer, is impersonal principle. The Lord is all blissfulness, the reality behind all, the goodness, the truth in everything. That is what is glorious. But God is the infinite, impersonal being, ever existence, unchanging, immortal, fearlessness, and you are all embodiments of that. This is the God of Vedanta, and this heaven is everywhere. In this heaven dwell all the personal gods there are, which you are yourselves. We must become thinkers. Every birth is painful. We must get out of materialism. This struggle is the only worship. All the rest is mere shadow. Worship everything is God. Every form is his temple. All else is the delusion. Always look within, never without. Unless society changes, how can such a religion as Vedanta prevail? It will take thousands of years to have large numbers of truly rational human beings. It is very hard to show people new things, to give them great ideas. It is harder still to knock off old superstitions, very hard. They do not die easily. Past, present, and future knowledge exist in us all. This Vedanta is not a new religion. It is as old as God. The unity of all existence, you all have it already within yourselves. The whole universe is one existence. There cannot be anything else. Unity is knowledge. Diversity is ignorance. This Vedanta is everywhere. Only you must become conscious of it. The hour comes when great people shall arise and make vivid and powerful the true religion, the worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. And those will be the end of the excerpts of Swami Vivekananda's lecture, Is Vedanta the Religion of the Future? Like I say, it's probably a 1-hour talk, so you can read it. It's available in the complete works. We see in the Bhagavad Gita too, actually, Krishna said, this is chapter 11, verse 7, "Here today, behold the whole universe, moving and unmoving, and whatever else thou desirest to see it all unified in my body." And so with a couple minutes to go, I'm just going to close with a few excerpts from the other song, Alleluia Lubi, which means Alleluia of Love. And the video begins with a child, about 12 years old, young boy, and he sings the line, "Children of the 21st century, the 20th century has ended." Then the scene shifts to a monastic, and he's singing high in a bell tower with all of these different sized bells. And his line is, "Can it be that humanity will never find an answer to the question of concord or harmony, coexistence, peace?" Others join in the Song of Alls, and it gets to a point where it says, "We're begging of you peace. Without it, there is no use in living." And just then, right after that line, the video the video transitions to a children's choir, which I thought was a very nice artistic way to present this, because they chastised the adults a little bit, because the line was after the quarreling and feasting, and then the children come in and say, "We have forgotten what we have come to earth for," and then they sing the chorus, "Alleluia Luvi, Alleluia Luvi, Alleluia to love, Alleluia to, Alleluia to love." So thank you, friends. My thanks to all of those whose works made this talk possible. I'm just going to roll the credits here so that we capture them on YouTube. Everything was used with written permission where necessary. And we will see that more of Swami Vivekananda's teachings next week during the symposium and the puja, and the week after, on Sunday the 30th, Swami Yogatmananda will be talking about Vivekananda starts Ramakrishna Mission, so you'll have different aspects of these teachings. But those were some of the thoughts that came to mind when I started contemplating on the idea of a beautiful future. So thank you, friends, for listening. The announcements for next week. Again, there's the symposium and the puja coming up next Sunday. The Tuesday and Friday classes will continue on as usual. There is no monthly meeting of the Vedanta Society of Connecticut this year. This month, sorry. Yeah, that would disappoint a lot of people. Okay, so I think that's it. So we can do the closing prayer. May the divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Now we'll have arati.
Mr. Flicker.
Okay.
Breaker of all our worldly bondage and adored by all, we adore you too. Stainless Lord, assuming human form. Stainless Lord, assuming human form. Transcendent yet love. You free us from the stain of sin and ornament our world. Consciousness is your form. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Looking at them, illusion is gone. Ocean of shining love and feeling, ever inebriated in your infinite love. Your feet always dear to your devotees. Your feet always dear to your devotees. Form are brought to cross this world. Revealed to us as God incarnate and the Lord of all things, helping us join with you. Your mind's always set in the divine light. Your mind's always set in the divine light. This we can see through your grace. Destroyer of our worldly sorrow and compassion, so infinite for the world's deliverance. Your lives offered for the world's deliverance, saving us from darkness and fear. Renouncer of all lust and lucre, therefore you were always spurning sensual light. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Grant to us pure love for you. You're fearless and you're free from doubting, with your mind very firmly resolved. Causeless refuge of your devotees, causeless refuge of your devotees, renouncing caste and birth. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of life. You give love and even-sightedness. You give love and even-sightedness to remove our anguish here. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of life. You give love and even-sightedness. You give love and even-sightedness to remove our anguish here. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, yet you are the basis of both. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, yet you are the basis of both. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Dhidhidhe langa ranga bhanga, these are all the sounds of mridanga. Dhidhidhe langa ranga bhanga, these are all the sounds of mridanga. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Jaya Jaya for your worship divine. Hara Hara for your worship divine. Shiva Shiva for your worship divine. Breaker of all our worldly bondage and adored by all, we adore you too. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Auspicious and blessed graciousness sublime, all noble ends you give to us, granting us refuge, all-seeing Gauri, O Mother Divine, our love to you. Creation, preservation, dissolution are your powers, eternal one. Nature's real basis, nature's essence, O Mother Divine, our love to you. We come seeking refuge from anguish. Be our Savior through your deep concern. All our suffering remove, Goddess, O Mother Divine, our love to you. O Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Jai Shri Ram Krishna Dev Ki Jai. Jai Shri Sarda Devi ki Jai. Jai Shri Swami Vivekananda ki Jai. Jai Shri Buddhadev ki Jai. Jai Shri Jesus Christ ki Jai. Jai Shri Swami Turiyananda ki Jai. So today being Swami Turiyanandaji's birthday, we are going to be singing the Sri Ramakrishna Parshada Vandanam song, the direct disciple birthday song. And when it comes to the line for Swami Turiyananda, we'll repeat that line. Jayo Jayo Rama Krishna Bhuvana Mangala. Jayo Jayo Rama Krishna Bhuvana Mangala. Jayo Mata Shama Shuta Oti Jaya Jaya Rama Krishna Bhuvana Mangala. Jaya Vivekananda Parama Dayala. Prabhura Manasha Shuta Jaya Shri Rakhala. Jaya Premananda Prema Maya Kalebara. Jaya Shivananda Jaya Leela Shahochara. Yogi Jogananda Jaya Nitya Niranjana. Jaya Shashi Guru Pade Gato Tanumana. Jaya Jaya Rama Krishna Bhuvana Mangala. Sheba Para Jogi Bara Adbhuta Ananda. Abhedo Ananda Jaya Gata Mahabandha. Jogorato Tago Brata Tore Akhato. Repeat. Gagorato Tago Brata Tore Akhato. Sharato Shudhira Shanto Jano Gananato. Jibe Shiva Sheva Brata Gangadhara Veera. Jaya Shri Vivekananda शान्तो गम्भीर प्रधानो गोपालो मातृ सेवा परायण शारदा शारदा पदे गतो प्राण मन जय जय राम कृष्ण भुवन मंगल बालक चरित्र जय सुबोध सरल नागो बारो त्यागो वीर विवेक संबल कथामृत बरिशान गौर जलधार गिरीश भैरव जय विश्वास आकार राम कृष्ण दास दास जय सबाकार राम कृष्ण लीला स्थान जय बारंबार राम कृष्ण नाम जय श्रवण मंगल भक्त वांछित जय चरण कमल जय जय राम कृष्ण भुवन मंगल जय जय राम कृष्ण भुवन मंगल. Readings for the birth anniversary of Swami Turiyananda. Swami Turiyananda, birth name Harinath Chattopadhyay, monastic name meaning one who is absorbed in the bliss of the fourth state of consciousness, Turiya. Birthplace North Calcutta. Birth date 1863, 13th day after new moon of the month of Paush, which happened to be January 3rd. Education Kambuliatola Bengali School, General Assembly Christian Missionary. Hobbies and interest: wrestling, fitness exercises, poetry. Religious influence: father who was Orthodox Brahmin. First meeting with Sri Ramakrishna at age 13 or 14 at neighbor's house and saw him in a crowd. The second meeting was more formally 2 or 3 years later. On his deathbed, Hari's father said, "Hari belongs to the world and the world belongs to Hari." So he foresaw the future life of his youngest son, Hari. Hari was orphaned at age 12. His mother died when he was 3, father when he was 12. From boyhood, he was drawn to the ideals of orthodoxy and asceticism. His favorite book was the Rama Gita, an Advaitic treatise. He would cook for himself, bathed 3 times a day, and practiced japam. He wrestled and did fitness exercises to maintain a strong body. which would be put through severe austerities in the future. He also told his friends that he would never marry. Although orthodox, he would attend Christian classes on the Bible, while many other Hindu school children did not. All religious books fascinated him. He memorized the Chandi, the Gita, Vivek-Chudamani, and several works of Tulsidas. His purpose in life was to become Jivan Mukta. When he was a teenager, he saw Sri Ramakrishna in a state of ecstasy and radiance. Yet, since he was a believer of Shankara's non-dualism, renunciation, austerity, and continence, he felt it was not necessary to pursue Sri Ramakrishna, who was a believer of the Divine Mother. A few years later, however, he visited Dakshineshwar and slowly became comfortable there. Sri Ramakrishna asked him to come on weekdays, as there would be fewer people in attendance. Hari spent 6 years learning from and serving Sri Ramakrishna before his teacher's demise in 1886. In 1887, at Baranagar, he took monastic vows and was named Swami Turiyananda. He soon left to put into practice the life of a wandering ascetic. This he did for 12 years, pilgrimaging through northern India, Rajput, Meerut, Abu Road, Srinagar, etc. During this time, he learned new languages, including Gurumukhi, and also studied Granth Sahib, the sacred book of the Sikhs. He memorized the 8 Upanishads and the Vivek Chudamani, the crest jewel of discrimination, and also practiced that his book knowledge be erased. A police officer thought he was an anarchist posing as a monk, asked him many questions, and upon his fearless response said, "How dare you speak that way? Are you not afraid of the police?" Swami Turiyananda replied, "I am not even afraid of Yama, the god of death. What to speak of police?" This policeman later became his devotee. Though he would speak so succinctly, Swami Turiyananda's nature was intensely meditative and austere. He did not crave for crowds, public works, or organization. His work was to be a character builder of individuals. He studied the nature of each of his students, smoothing their angularities and correcting their false steps. He disliked procrastination, saying, "Whatever you have to do tomorrow, do it today. Whatever you have to do today, do it now." Swami Vivekananda asked him to teach scriptures to the monastics back in Alambazar. This he did, but after a year again became a wandering monk. Swami Vivekananda asked him to come to America, and he taught classes in the New York Vedanta and in Montclair, New Jersey. A New York devotee offered 160 acres of California land to the order, and Swami Turiyananda was sent there at the San Antonio Valley to establish an ashrama, later called Shanti Ashram. This was primitive living, 60 miles from a railway, the nearest river for water 6 miles away, with one cabin and a shed, but plenty of scorpions, snakes, and tarantulas. He became discouraged, knowing he was responsible for his students, but he got a glimpse of the American pioneering spirit, and they all demonstrated that they would not be cowed by hardship. For 2 years, this was a living, teaching ashrama by his example. His health began to break down from years of severe austerities, and he began his return to India to recover. When he heard the death of Swami Vivekananda en route, he was so shocked that after only a few days of rest, he left Belur Mutt to resume pilgrimages through Himalayas to Kurukshetra, Nangol, Kankal, Puri, etc. During 1915, he spent time establishing a retreat ashram in Almora with Swami Shivanand. During these years, his health had taken a toll with various illness, gallstones, malaria, diabetes. He finally settled in Varanasi in 1917. Several surgeries were done on his back, removing carbuncles, but he always refused chloroform, exhibiting tremendous fortitude. The attending physician became his devotees. He possessed a wonderful capacity to dissociate himself from the body-mind complex. In 1922, he underwent another carbuncle surgery on his back, needing much tissue removal. The back became infected and gangrene set in. Swami Turiyananda fearlessly met his demise on July 21, 1922. Some of his sayings. 1. We see only the reflection of our mind. See the Lord always in everything, and you will see no evil. A suspicious mind sees evil everywhere. A trusting mind sees only good. 2. Sincerity is the backbone of spirituality. One should practice it in all thoughts and actions. Make your heart and tongue one. 3. Why do you make plans? Why are you scheming? Why do you look so far ahead? Let Mother alone plan. Human planning is in vain if she does not consent. This does not mean idleness. Know her will and then be up and doing like a man. 4. From the highest standpoint, the body is the greatest disease. We want to go beyond the body idea and realize we are Atman. It is love of the body that stands in the way of achieving realization. So long as one loves the body, one will be born again and again. Know that the body is an illusion. 5. Try to live with those who have mastered the mind. If you cannot live with them, think of them. Mind controls mind. Always watch your mind. Be the master of the senses and the mind. The mind can concentrate in many ways, through meditation, singing, reading, etc. Salutations to Swami Turiyananda.